Road Trips and Missing Persons by Adriana in the Snow, Chapter 15. The next 2 hours were the most frustrating ones of Logan's life. It seemed like the entire universe, or perhaps more accurately, his entire family, was doing its best to make his life and job as stressful as possible. He'd stepped away from his desk for less than 1 minute to make sure Darlene and Frederick's comms were set up to his specifications. He had them outfitted with what he would usually give to undercover agents. It was a constant stream of audio from their side, and Logan could talk to them with a click of a button. It was on an entirely different frequency than anyone else used, and, barring damage to the actual equipment itself, it should never go offline. When he got back to his desk and checked his phone, he had a missed call and a text message from Patton. Of course. Of course. In the 30 seconds he is away from his desk, someone finally calls him back. He opened the text message. His first thought was, "Patton, you are lactose intolerant. Why are you buying so much cheese?" His second thought was that the stream of emojis was unintelligible. What about a baby? And a knife? If he just bought cheese, why did he need to go get a burger, fries, and ice cream? And on that account, why more dairy? He tried to call Patton back, but as he was beginning to expect at that point, there was no answer. Frustrated, he slammed his finger down on the end call button. "I have no idea what that means," he texted him back. He set his phone back down on his desk after making absolutely sure that his ringer was at full volume. "Be sure to track all traffic updates in their path," Logan said. The other people in the base snapped to attention, their fingers going to work at their keyboards. Then he pushed the button on his desk. "Frederick?" he asked. "We just got on I-25, Frederick replied instantly. "Good," Logan replied. He sat down in his chair to rub at his eyes and grabbed his phone once more. He shot off texts to different people in a pattern he was getting very used to at this point. Then he went back to look at Patton's message once again. "Why must you always use these infernal things?" he asked the text from his brother. He looked over his shoulder and saw Clara looking up. "Clara," he said. She flinched at his tone. "Yes?" she asked hesitantly. "Are you literate in the emoji text message language?" he asked. Yes, she said. He stood and placed his phone in front of her. "Can you make sense of this message from Patton?" he asked. She said, looking at it with a perplexed expression on her face. "I'm getting, he bought a lot of cheese, then he kidnapped or got kidnapped by a baby, he got fast food, and then did other things, and he got gas and coffee. He says everything's cool and he loves you." "He got kidnapped by a baby?" Logan asked skeptically. She gave him a helpless shrug. "That's what he said. He got in his car at the grocery store, but there was a baby with a knife and the baby made him drive." "Well, thank you for trying," Logan said. He took his phone back from her and wandered back over to his desk. "Okay," Darlene was saying over the comms, "but why do you even need chair covers for your apartment?" "To prevent damage and stains," Frederick said back. "You bought them for $20 at a yard sale. They're already stained. Even more of a reason to make a seat cover for them. It'll make them cuter, and since I'm sewing them, I can personalize. See, look, here's the pattern I'm using." "Fred, I'm driving." They continued to chat idly about Frederick's latest sewing project. Logan was just content to have an open line of communication with his agents. They eventually moved on from arguing the merit of chair covers and went on to discussing the pattern and color options. Well, at least Frederick was discussing it. Darlene had descended into non-committal hums, yeps, and "I can't look at that because I'm driving." "Do you like this flower design or this flower design better?" Frederick was asking. "The first one," was the answer. "You didn't even look." "Boss, there's been an accident on I-26, Emerson informed him from his desk. "Where?" Logan asked. "Around exit 52. The actual accident was only on the east side, but it was a truckload of cows, so it'll likely affect Fred and Lena's path." "All right," Logan said. "Find me the quickest alternative route." Emerson nodded and turned back to his computer. Logan pushed the talk button. "There is an accident ahead of you," he informed Frederick and Darlene. "We will be giving you an alternate route. Stand by." "Yes, boss," Darlene replied. "Have them take exit 65 and get on Highway 236, Emerson instructed. Logan nodded and pressed down the button again. "You'll want to get off on exit 65, he told them. "You'll take 236 until you're past the accident." "Got it," Darlene replied. "We just passed mile marker 61 a few seconds ago, so we'll be there soon," Frederick offered. Darlene and Frederick exited the interstate without any problems. It was a few minutes later that, with the obnoxious sound of a saxophone, the song titled "We Are the Number One Bad Guys," which was reportedly a mashup of a song from a children's show and a pop song, started blaring from his phone. Usually he'd be annoyed by hearing that sound, as Patton and Remus had said it behind his back, and he couldn't figure out how to change it. Today, however, the sound was a relief. He grabbed his phone to look at the text message from Remus. "I'm not his keeper," is what the text said in response to Logan's many messages asking him if he knew where his brother was. Logan stared at his phone for at least a whole minute. "What's wrong, boss?" Clara finally hesitantly asked. "I," Logan said calmly, "love my children." Uh-huh. Logan typed back a message he was certain at this point would not get a response, and then he hit the talk button on his desk. "So, Frederick," he said, "tell me more about those chair covers. You mentioned flowers?" Frederick's voice said, "Yes?" Logan glanced up at the other agents in the room, who were all staring intently on the designs on their desks. "Have you considered Paisley?" Logan focused on listening to Frederick and Darlene's conversations, while the rest of the office focused on not looking at him unless it was to update him on the traffic for Frederick and Darlene for the next 15 minutes. "Whoa!" Darlene suddenly said, and Logan could hear the sound of braking through the sensitive listening devices. "What?" Logan pushed the button to ask. "There were a couple of cars in our lane," Frederick said. "Was that a gunshot?" Logan asked when there was a loud pop on the other end. Give us a minute, boss," Darlene requested. He could hear the engines turn after a moment, likely as they accelerated again. "What's going on?" Logan asked. "We're in a car chase now, apparently," Frederick replied, voice strained. "Why?" Logan asked. "I recognized the first car," Darlene said. "What do you mean you recognized the car?" Logan asked. Shit," Darlene said. Logan could hear the sound of tires squealing. A few seconds later, there was a huge crash, followed by a couple of incredibly loud splashes. "What's going on?" Logan asked. There was cursing on the other end of the line in response, and the sound of 2 doors slamming shut and then running. "Darlene! Frederick! What is going on?" There were a few more seconds where he could hear the sound of breathing, and then the sound cut out halfway through the sound of a splash. "Frederick?" Logan said. "Darlene?" He took his finger off the button. "Please tell me we didn't just lose signal," he said to the room at large. There was silence. "Please, somebody tell me we didn't just lose signal to the high-tech spy gear I put on our agents." After a pause, Emerson finally spoke. It's not waterproof, sir." "I see," Logan said, his tone serene. "It isn't waterproof." He looked down at his hand settled on top of his desk next to the useless talk button and the phone that no one seemed to be willing to call or text with anything useful. He turned his hands over, grabbed the bottom of the desk, and flipped the whole thing over. His computer smashed on the ground and the normally well-organized pens and papers scattered across the floor. "Well, why the hell isn't it waterproof?" No one dared to answer his question, and Logan pinched the bridge of his nose, surveying his broken computer and overturned desk for a few minutes. Eventually, he straightened. "I need to borrow someone's desk," he said. 3 people scrambled to their feet, but he held up a hand. "I'll use Darlene's." They all scrambled back to their desks. "And send someone after those 2. He strode over to Darlene's desk and sat at her computer. He pulled up every local news outlet he could find. They needed to find a new starting place, because he honestly didn't know where to go from here. He spent an hour trying to piece together what exactly was happening out there with news articles, police scanners, and other information channels. There was an explosion an hour and a half earlier in the city where this had all started, and he worried that had something to do with the lack of communication, as it was on the road from Nelson's base to the city. However, that still left almost 2 hours before that of silence from Roman and Janice unaccounted for. There were also 2 separate break-ins to the security office of the grocery store down the street from Remington Gates' home, which Logan imagined somehow was connected, but he couldn't figure out how. And what did the cows have to do with it? Anything? Everything? What was going on? There was no news about whatever had happened with Frederick and Darlene, and the other team of agencies sent after them were still 20 minutes out from their last known location. Boss? A tentative voice said. Logan looked up at Clara, who was standing at the edge of the desk. She flinched on the expression at his face when he looked up. Unless a member of my family or Virgil Gates has arrived at this base, I don't want to hear about it, he snapped. Well, she replied, actually,